This is entitled Getting to Know Milton Johns. So let's start with the very first question. What is your full name given at birth?
My full name at birth was John Robert Milton.
When is your birthday and the year of your birth?
I was born on the 13th of May 1938, just in time for the Second World War.
As a child, where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in a working class district of Bristol by the name of Bedminster, and I went to the local school at South Street and then later on to a grammar school, which is now defunct. It was in Knowle, on the top of the hill, and a jolly fine place it was, but that's gone in the passage of time.
If any, how many brothers or sisters did you have growing up?
Well, I was, to all intents and purposes, an only child, because my brother was 10 years older than myself. I think my birth in 1938 had been delayed because of the unemployment in the 1930s, which my father suffered from. And although he was an engineer by trade, the only job he could get was as a bus driver, or a tram driver as it was then, and that he did for the rest of his working life, God bless him.
What is your earliest memory of going to the cinema or the theatre?
Well, that would be at the Bristol Hippodrome for the annual pantomime. How old I was, I'm not sure, but I was totally mesmerised by the whole business, and it seemed to me to be a wonderful, magical experience. And my love of theatre is as sound and as good as ever it was. I decided there and then that I would like to be an actor. I later on deviated a little. I thought I might want to work in the horse racing business. I spent some time at East Ilsley in Berkshire before I returned to Bristol, and then started doing amateur work simply because I'd enjoyed theatricals at school. And I joined an organisation, now defunct I'm sure, the Curtain Theatre Club. It existed to do circuits around Bristol in hospitals and elsewhere to entertain people, and that was where I got my grounding.
Growing up, did you have a favourite actor or actress whose work you really admired?
I didn't, actually. I admired professionalism across the board, male, female, whatever. But I had no particular idol who I followed enthusiastically. No, the Theatre Royal was a place that I had seen some tremendous drama. I mean, it was the days before I went to the school when Peter O'Toole started there, straight from drama school. And I remember there was a Russian play, Chekhov, and at one point in one of the acts, a character comes on downstage right and crosses over and has a few words about something that's happened at a mine, some catastrophe, and then leaves the stage a few minutes later. And this fellow came on and did what was really a bit part, and you couldn't take your eyes off him. I mean, there was something special about him. His name was Peter O'Toole. Later on, one understood why you couldn't take your eyes off him. And he was leading man at the Bristol Old Vic when I was an amateur, and then I joined the Vic School and fortunately enough went from the Vic School into the Vic Company and then onwards. I mean, I'd seen John Gielgud, of course, many times, and then I had the pleasure of working with him in Germany, of all places, on, I think it was a film about the war, and I had a lovely scene with him, and he said to me before we started, he said, "I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what I'm doing here. It's probably something to do with the money," he said. he was so good to work with and so unassuming. There was no talking down to you. He was immediately a colleague and a companion. I had a great admiration for him.
Was there an actual event or trigger that first prompted you to seriously consider acting as a profession, and how old do you think you were at the time?
Yes, I think there was. I first got the bug when I was in the junior section of South Street School in Bedminster, Bristol. And in those days, they had a small group, 5 or 6 actors who would go round and do a little play and then involve some of the children in it. I thought that was marvellous, but to the horror of my teacher, I was picked out with a few others to do some improvised talking and acting. And as I was apparently rather quiet, she was rather distressed by this, and she thought, I'm not going to enjoy it. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I said something without wishing to be funny, which tickled the fancy of the audience, and they laughed. And I remember thinking at the time, that's nice, I wonder if I can do it again. And somehow or another, heaven knows how, I was able to wait until the appropriate moment, and then I got another laugh, which was even bigger than the first. I remember the feeling now. I had the experience that you get later in life when you're acting in a comedy, of feeling the force of laughter on your face. Now that may seem odd to people who've never been on a stage, but when an audience roars with laughter, you get the impact of it on stage, and it's quite toxic, I can tell you, because you want to get another one. And I don't know how, because I have no relations in the theatre at all. But somehow I had enough sense to wait until the right moment, and then I got another laugh, and I was hooked after that.
And how old do you think you were then?
I would say I was probably 9.
And you thought at 9 this is something you would want to do as a career, or just something that you'd like to explore as a passion?
I didn't know then about a career, or whether it was possible, but I knew I enjoyed the experience and wanted to repeat it. So thereafter, of course, I was put into any little plays that we were doing, and I loved it. When I got to the grammar school, Merrywood, which no longer exists, I took part in the work there. I wasn't much interested in mathematics or anything of that kind, so I had a peculiar record there of being, if not top of the class, near the top of the class for English and history, and near the bottom of the class for mathematics and everything else, which really wasn't allowed. You know, you had your position. You were either at the top for everything or at the bottom for everything, and that was all right. But you can't be at the top sometimes and at the bottom the other. That was rather frowned upon. I was obsessed with horse racing, which I attend to this very day, and I went off at the age of, I think, 16 or 17 to East Ilsley, to spend my life in horse racing, and that didn't work out. Although later on I did a lot of work on racecourses doing their public address. So I suppose I had the best of both worlds, really.
Did you ever attend a stage school or audition, study or formally train to be an actor anywhere?
Oh yes, yes. I trained at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School. It was in my hometown, but I chose it deliberately because of its close contact with the Bristol Old Vic, just down the road in King Street. And that was the start.
Even before you began your acting career, or maybe when you were between roles at any point in your career, what other jobs have you done?
Well, when I left school, as I say, I intended to take up a lifetime in horse racing and riding. Then the idea of riding a horse at 30 miles an hour into a thick fence rather appealed to me. It horrifies me now. But that was what I wanted to do. I love and still love the theatricality of a horse race meeting. I love the atmosphere. I love the thoroughbreds. And I wanted to be part of that. I never was, but I still go racing, and I love it as much today as I ever did.
What was your first ever paid acting performance, i.e. your professional debut, and how old were you then?
Well, I'd done a lot of amateur work. Excuse me. I'd done a lot of amateur work. And in Bristol at the time, there were at least 3 major amateur groups, the WE Players and 2 others, and they operated, putting on a couple of plays a year in the centre of Bristol, usually at the old Little Theatre. And they were the tops of the amateur world, but almost every church had its little amateur group in those days. And that's really how I started.
Can you remember how old you were or what production you were working in when someone first asked you for your autograph?
Oh, I can't, actually. I think it would have been when I joined the Bristol Old Vic from the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School in whenever it was, 1961.
Have you ever been starstruck when meeting someone famous? And have you ever asked anyone for their autograph?
I never have asked anyone for their autograph. I have admired, and deeply admired, some actors and actresses. And it was a delight later on when I was able to work with them.
Throughout your career, were you ever one for collecting any memorabilia? And what, if anything, do you still have in your possession today?
I don't think I was a collector of memorabilia. I still have programmes of productions I was in, going way back. That I think is the limit to it. I've always been interested in what I was going to do next, really, rather more than what I'd done.
To perform in, what would you choose? Theatre, television, cinema or radio?
Well, it's got to be theatre. Everything else has certain restrictions to it. And in a way, in everything else, you are a cog in the wheel that is turning. You depend in filming on the lighting, on the script, on so many other things. But when you're on stage, you're on your own. And you either sink or swim. Thank God I swam.
Which of your parts, performances or characters would you say people remember you for the most?
Oh, I think some of the television productions that I did in the 60s and 70s. I did a lot of television at that time, and people still come up to me and say, "Oh, I saw you in so-and-so and so-and-so," and then relate exactly what the story was about and so forth. I think you're privileged in a way because you pop into people's houses and have a sort of intimate relationship with them at second hand, as it were. So I just love the whole business.
Whether it be for what you did on stage or screen, can you name any of your own individual performances that you were personally the most proudest of?
That's not easy. Fortunately, I did an awful lot of work on television and also to a degree on the stage. I find it impossible to pick out any one or two. I think if you're fortunate, if you're in the best company, with the best support and the best directing, it's one of life's pleasures. If you're not, then you know it's an uphill task.
Is there a part or a role that you still remember today that you auditioned for or really wanted but didn't get?
I'm sure there were many, but there's nothing that I nurse a grievance about at all. I have been extremely fortunate in the range of work I've done. And so if you had a disappointment with one, next week the phone would ring and there would be something else to do. And that's the way my career went in the main. You get your periods when nobody wants you, and then you get the times when half a dozen people want you all at the same time. And 5 of them get very annoyed because they can't have you at that particular time. But I mean, that's, I think it's technically called sod's law.
I mean, that pretty much leads nicely on to my next question, which is, was there ever a part or an acting role that you turned down for whatever reason, but later regretted down the line?
I don't think so. I can't think of one that I didn't do. I was so fortunate because as a working character actor, I was able to do a wide range of things. I mean, some actors are particularly skilled at doing one thing. Whether I was skilled or not, I don't know. I must have been to a degree in order to stay working. But I did a wide range. Comedy, tragedy, whatever. I mean, for me, that's what acting is.
Can you name a co-star that you liked working with the most, and maybe any that you had a tougher time working with?
Well, let's start with the tougher time. Remarkably few. I remember doing an episode of a television series in which the 2 leading characters were quite good in the morning, but after lunch they didn't work at all well. And they were very successful for a short space of time until people got tired of them. I think I've been enormously lucky.
And can you name who those 2 were?
I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
And would you say it was just naturally timing, or was it due to a liquid lunch?
A liquid lunch.
Ah, interesting.
Yes. Or a liquid breakfast in some cases. They were just a pain in the posterior, really. The vast number of people I worked with were highly professional, did their job, got on, get off, and didn't bump into the furniture.
I'll ask in a slightly different way. Outline what a director needs to do to get the best performance out of Milton Johns.
To have faith in their choice of you as an actor, to have faith in allowing you to study the text and come to a conclusion as to your character, and then to perform in the most professional way possible. Because everywhere time is limited. I mean, even if you've got 3 weeks rehearsal in the theatre, if you take up an inordinate amount of that time from the other actors, you're a pain in the posterior. But on the whole, I think I've been very, very lucky in the people that I've worked with. I don't think there's anything in particular about my mode of work that is any different to any other actor. You have a script, you get to terms with that script, and you give a performance. And if you're in television, you then find you're running 20 minutes overtime and things have to be cut, and it's always your best lines that they want to cut. But all in all, I've worked with some very, very fine and professional people over the years.
So what type of director do you respond best to? And can you name any directors that you worked with that really did the things you just articulated?
Yes. I think you know immediately when you work with someone as to whether it's going to be a good experience or not. I've found that the very best directors have confidence in you because they wouldn't have given you the part anyway. And a director who doesn't have confidence in you, who's presumably been told to employ you, that can be quite dodgy. But that happened very, very seldom in my experience. I worked with some fine directors, invidious to mention any particular names, but the experience in the main was rewarding.
A little bit of a left field one now, Milton. You are hosting an intimate dinner party and you're able to invite 3 other guests to attend, alive or dead, within the profession, outside of the profession, other than your wife, of course, and maybe your children. Who would you choose to invite and why?
Well, I think my old friend Marius Goring would be high up on the list. Marius wasn't to everyone's cup of tea, and you either got on with him or you didn't. And I got on with him very, very well. He was a fascinating man. He had a fascinating career, and I often went down to his house and we'd have a chat and coffee and so forth and talk over his old times. I had a very great respect for him. He was also very interested in equity, and I was on the Council of Equity for many years. I was its treasurer for many years, and he had a fierce antagonism towards the far left, which I must say was something I did as well.
So Marius would be one, and who would be your second and third?
Oh, that's very, very difficult because the field is so full of runners. I've often marvelled at the ability of so many of the people I've worked with. I mean, I'll work with anybody who is professional. And by professional, I mean you know your lines, you know what you're doing, you get on with it, you don't waste anyone's time. And in television, that's important, you know, because time is money in a very big sense. And I've been enormously lucky in the people. I remember working with Johnny Gielgud, charming man. He was so vulnerable, I think. There's a man who was at the top of his profession, but he was particularly vulnerable.
So we'll have John Gielgud there with Marius.
Yes.
And just put a bit of light humour. Who would be your favourite comedian?
I think, oddly enough, Max Wall, who was not an easy person to get to know, and his humour was very often on a razor's edge, and it could go either way. But I worked with him on a couple of things and thoroughly enjoyed working with him. I found him very professional.
Fantastic. So we've got Marius Goring, John Gielgud and Max Wall. Lovely.
Not a bad threesome, is it, really?
Fantastic. If you could relive one moment from your career once again, what would you choose?
Oh, that's very difficult. I think right at the very, very beginning, I studied at the Bristol Theatre School. And when we did our final production, to which all the agents and others came to.
You started at the beginning of your career. Maybe this is more of a retrospective question, but looking back over your career, do you have any regrets? If you had your time again, would you have done anything differently or made any different choices at any stage?
I don't think so. That just sounds awfully conceited. But I knew where I wanted to be trained. I knew where I wanted to go after that. And then get a good grounding in rep and then start doing television. I was very fortunate. But I wouldn't change anything of that progression up the ladder or down the ladder.
Tell us something about you, Milton, or your career that most people would not already know or be aware of.
Well, it's been varied by choice, really. I have interests. I have a great interest in horse racing and a great interest in cricket, both, I presume, rather English. And with horse racing, I started to do public address on racecourses and at Lingfield and other racecourses. Thoroughly enjoyed it because it was a totally different world, but it was a world in which I had started out at the age of 16 and given up. And I still love my racing to this day. I mean, to see a group of thoroughbred horses pounding up the course, it's bliss to me. I mean, I hope there's racing in heaven, and I hope I qualify to go. A thoroughbred horse is a magnificent, difficult animal, and can be ruined and can be frustrating also in its progress. But for me, the sight of a thoroughbred horse galloping, probably because in the deep past my forebears were farmers, country folk, but it always stirs something in me.
So you'll be in front of the TV with Cheltenham coming up?
I most certainly will, or at least if I have to be away from it, the recording will be on. It's the peak of the racing year. I would place it above the Derby or any other flat race. But those days at Cheltenham, top class steeplechasing, is my idea of bliss.
And last question, Milton. Finish the sentence. What happened to the actor Milton Johns?
He died. That's it.